Alrighty. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, YouTubers. Jerry Diamond with How to Get Out of Babylon. Slowly, sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly. Hope there's going to be a major exodus soon. Oh boy. Alright, I am a wee bit tired. Hey, yeah, I could just like wrap myself out here. And if you can't see that clock, too bad. But it's past midnight. I may just read one. I'm wearing her down again. Tomorrow's Friday. Not that that means anything, other than I gotta probably go into the store to get quail feed, at least, if not people feed. All right, natural events, part 1. Ding, 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 ding. The sound of the farm bell could be heard out in the pasture where John and his father were examining the ryegrass and vetch and trying to gauge the impact the ice storm may have had on its survival and growth. He grinned at his dad and said, "Heather's playing our tune. I could do with a cup of hot coffee." The two men walked up to the house, shucked their muddy boots, and went inside. The girls were setting out plates of sandwiches on the table and ladling out bowls of hot soup. Robert poured coffee for himself and his son. The family set into eating, concentrating on their plates with little conversation. In the background, the noon news came over the kitchen radio. The weather forecast predicted the day's high only in the low 40s and another hard freeze expected that night, with a chance of frost for the night following and a warming trend for the days following that. John looked at his father and said, "When the temperature starts staying above freezing, I expect we'll see that pasture mix taking off again. At least the ryegrass should. I don't know about the vetch. The book says it's pretty cold hardy, though, so I reckon it should do okay." Robert nodded. "Looks like we ought to be able to finish the last of the tables and tray racks in the greenhouse. Shouldn't take long to knock together seed flats after that. This weekend, when Ann and Lisa will be home, we can come up with some sort of seed starting mix, then fill the trays and get our first seeds in. Looks like what we've got under the plastic row covers pulled through, but they're going to grow slowly if temperatures stay low. If it goes to the low 20s and stays there for a while, they'll freeze even with the row covers." John nodded and said, "Yes, and with getting last night's ice storm so early in the year, I think we can count on it setting a new record this year. Wouldn't surprise me if it went into the single digits, maybe even hit 0. Brittany looked up and asked, "Do you think it might snow? That would be cool. I haven't seen snow since I was a little girl and visited my Uncle Nick in Maryland one Christmas. Maybe we could even build a snowman and have snowball fights." Robert chuckled. John grinned and said, "Snowman. Lord, I hope not, but this year it just could snow that much. Most I've ever seen here was back in the Christmas ice storm of 1989. Went down to 11 degrees, ice everywhere, snow too. Had snow on the north side of the house for 3 days. Lost power just like now and burst the water pipes. Probably could have gotten enough snow together to make a decent snowball, but I don't think there was enough on the whole yard to make even a small snowman." Melinda's eyes lit and started talking excitedly with Brittany about playing in the snow, and Heather chimed in as well. Robert asked John, "Has Mel even seen snow?" His son replied, "Yep. 4 years ago when we went up to visit Ann's parents in Maine. Saw more than I wanted to see. Hit a patch of ice and slid the car into a ditch full of snow. Like to have froze my behind off trying to get the car out. Fortunately, some fella in a big 4x4 Ford came along and pulled me out. The family thought it was funny and said it was just a fact of life up there." The men went back to their meal while the 3 girls happily talked about their various snow experiences and hoped there would be deep snow in Florida, an idea that John devoutly hoped would not come to be. After the weather forecast, there was local news which segued into national and international news. In a ceremony on the steps of the old Capitol building today, Governor Bush signed into law the Work to Eat bill that passed out of the House Senate Conference Committee yesterday. One of the provisions of this bill included a requirement that all persons receiving disaster relief or other types of aid administered by the state must prove they are gainfully employed in order to continue receiving the assistance. This is expected to greatly increase enlistments in the National Recovery Corps due to job losses resulting from the asteroid impact and its aftermath. Other provisions include instituting child care centers in as yet unnamed areas and a relaxation of child care licensing requirements to better allow unemployed parents to be able to find work. Another bill that will have significant impact on the state is a streamlined justice measure introduced simultaneously last week in the House and Senate. In spite of heavy opposition, the bill's path both House, but with significant differences that will have to be resolved in conference committee. Some form of the bill is expected to emerge next week to be sent to the governor's desk, where he has indicated he will sign it into law. There are major differences between the House and Senate versions, but both have as their basic tenets proposals to limit felony conviction appeals to just 2. Other provisions that were added as amendments will have to await the final conference committee decision. Nationally, Senator Clinton of New York today introduced legislation authorizing the Treasury Department to recall all U.S. paper currency in order that new currency may be issued at an exchange ratio of 10-1 to start immediately upon its passing into law, with an exchange deadline of 6 months, after which all old currency still in circulation will become valueless. The stated reasoning for the bill was to bring under control the runaway inflation that has driven the U.S. dollar to less than a quarter of its pre-impact value and still falling. This in turn will enable the Federal Reserve System to begin reopening banks across the nation, which will then allow businesses to have access to credit in order for the economy to begin to rebuild. The bill immediately came over hostile fire by a number of senators. No corresponding bill has yet been filed in the House, but a sponsor is expected to file such a motion next week. President Bush has indicated a willingness to sign such a bill if it can be brought to him in a form he finds to be acceptable. John and Robert both sighed disgustedly together. Well, that's it. If Clinton's proposing it and the president has already said he'd sign it, you know it's going to pass no matter how much hooting and hollering goes on. It'll all be for show. There goes Ann's salary, our retirement plans, your Social Security check, the whole ball of wax. Notice they didn't say anything about reducing the value of things like mortgages by 10-1. Well, all I can say is they better, or they'll be courting a damned revolution. Robert just shook his head and went on eating. Also on the national scene, President Bush is expected to formally propose 2 nominees on Monday to fill vacancies on bench of the Supreme Court. The names of those 2 nominees have not been released. Internationally, reports have begun to arrive from the Argentine capital of shots being fired at the presidential palace as units of the army have begun taking stations at major thoroughfares in the city. Emails received from persons working near to the palace indicate they believe a coup may be underway, but we have not been able to confirm this. No response has been received from the Argentine Public Affairs Office. Argentina has been suffering from an economically disastrous plunge in the value of its currency, leading to the devastating hyperinflation and default on its international loan payments. We will continue to bring you the latest information as we receive it. John turned off the radio and said, I've had about all the bad news I can take for one day. I'm going back to work. He stood, put on his hat, and went out onto the porch to put on his boots. A few moments later, Robert finished his meal and did the same. With lunch over, Brittany left to clean the bathroom while Heather and Melinda cleaned the kitchen. Heather worked in a busy, industrious fashion.